Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today in this Policy Lab. Al-Shabaka's Policy Lab program is an online live stream space where audiences can engage directly with expert analysts from our nearly 200-member network. The labs are free and open for public participation. Today, we will discuss the so-called Peace to Prosperity workshop, which is taking place in Bahrain. This economic workshop falls within long-standing American and Israeli claims to improve Palestinian economic conditions and increase regional economic cooperation to pave the way for peace, however, without achieving rights. Based on information released by the White House, the plan calls for $50 billion in investments, not only for Palestinians, but also for Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt. So to discuss the Bahrain workshop, we are joined today by Diana Buttu and Ibrahim Fraihat. Both are policy analysts at Al-Shabaka. Diana is a lawyer and a political analyst who previously served as a legal advisor to the Palestinian negotiating team. She frequently comments on Palestine for international media outlets. And Ibrahim Fraihat is a professor of international conflict resolution at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies and is also affiliate scholar at Georgetown University. And I'm Noor Arafeh. I will be facilitating this policy lab. I served previously as the policy fellow of Al-Shabaka in Palestine, and I'm currently doing my PhD in the UK. So as the facilitator, I will start by asking a few questions to Diana and Ibrahim, but please feel free to send us your questions and we will respond to your questions in the second half of this call. So as I mentioned in the introduction, Ibrahim and Diana, the use of economic means as a way to achieve peace without achieving rights has a long history in Palestine. So my question is there anything different today with the Trump administration and its approach? And what is different? Diana, maybe we can start with you and then Ibrahim.
Yeah, thank you. First, thank you, Noor, and thank you, Ibrahim, and thank you everyone for joining today. It's really an honor and a pleasure. Is there anything different? Yes and no. So in terms of substance, on the substance, this isn't at all different in terms of the projects and the ideas that have been put forward. The concept of economic peace is a concept that had been pushed forward from as far back as the 1970s with Shimon Peres, and the idea should have died with him. Unfortunately, it continues to be an idea that many continue to try to advocate as though somehow Palestinian rights are for sale, and that if we just go down this path of pursuing economics, then we will give up on our national and individual rights. And we've seen this most particularly at the start of the occupation, when Israel went to great pains to try to do things like count the number of refrigerators that people had or the number of televisions that people had in order to try to tell and to sell to Palestinians that the occupation was actually a good thing for them rather than a bad thing. And in terms of the substance of what we're seeing now, many of the projects that they have laid out are projects that I remember from my days in of negotiations, everything from the rail connection to the other investment projects. Those are all recycled and rehashed programs. There is one difference, though. Those recycled and rehashed programs in the past, and I'm talking specifically about the early 2000s up until the end of the Obama administration, all of those projects had in mind that the partner that would be doing or fulfilling those projects was going to be a Palestinian government, whether it's the Palestinian Authority or otherwise. This time around, what we see is a very specific attempt to sideline the Palestinian Authority and instead have economic development that is done simply by the business community or by creating a new body in order to try to administer these funds. So the short answer is that it is the same in terms of the projects. It's different in terms of its implementation, but sadly, it's the same thinking that continues to permeate of favoring or trying to eliminate rights by pushing through a more robust economy. And what they continue to not understand is that economic development in the context of occupation is always going to be limited, and an economy will never be able to thrive if there isn't the elements of freedom.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Shabaka, for organizing this. And I agree totally with what Diana said. And to build on what she just explained about the problems with this approach, actually, I see there are three differences. Yes, of course. I mean, this is not a new concept, and it has been used many times in the past, in the 70s and the 90s. And by the way, in 2008, because also that the development approach that was led by Salam Fayyad in 2008 was all along the same lines. However, I see there are three major differences between this and all what was tried in the past. One is that always in the past, there was a political vision, regardless whether we agree with it or we don't like it, or with all the reservations that we have. The Shimon Peres New Middle East was based on the Oslo Agreement. So Oslo, with all its problems, there was a vision. So this economic approach was built on that. This approach, the Kushner approach, there is no political vision. There is no political track. We're just meeting in Bahrain, in Manama, just to talk economics. So how does this link to politics and to the political vision and to be a part of an approach to resolving the conflict? There is nothing as we speak today. That's one. Two, the other also problem with this is that this is all built on false promises. I mean, Kushner was talking about $50 billion. I would like him to show me where the $50 billion are. There are no $50 billion. I have not heard anyone from the donor countries. Europe is not there, is a major donor, and that usually historically in all the issues and all the approaches is one of the major donors. They're not there. Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is busy with its war in Yemen, and there are the dozens of billions of dollars that has already spent on the war in Yemen. Where is the money? I mean, Saudi Arabia is taking money from the World Bank and from other banks. So where are the $50 billion? And so we would like to see this, because we should not be misled by these false promises that Kushner, Greenblatt, and Friedman, that they are selling to the people and treating people as that they don't understand anything. And also the third major problem is that there is no economic development in this. I looked at it, it's all doing projects under occupation. So how are the Palestinians are going to take responsibility and going to be in charge of this and develop an economy, even if the money is there, which is the money is not? How are you going to build this? There is nothing in economic development that can be that can really track some sort of an approach to an economic approach the way that Kushner would like to see it. So these are all problems are out there. We have not heard any answers or any clarifications or how this workshop is going to deal with these things. There are, of course, many other problems, but I'll stop here.
Mm-hmm. So the White House published a couple of days ago the economic plan, the different projects and goals. What stands out for you about the economic plan that was published? Maybe we can start with Diana.
What stood out for me was a few things. The first thing was the fact that they failed to even mention the political circumstances in which Palestinians are living under. So there is no mention of the word occupation. There's no mention of the end goal of being freedom. It's simply a question of a very glossy, very stylized brochure that brings into place a lot of ideas, but not really anything that is touching the reality in which Palestinians live. The other thing that was very, so, for 38 pages to not say the word freedom is very telling, and 38 pages not to use the word occupation is very telling. The other thing that really struck me as somebody who had been involved in the negotiations was that there was really no sense that how it is that they expect that Israel's actually going to do any of this. So it was very pie in the sky, wonderful, wonderful ideas, etc. But there's nothing concrete in terms of what it is that they are going to do to make sure that Israel actually affects these changes and allows these projects to take shape. I'll give you an example. This is from back in the days that I was involved in the negotiations back in 2005. Now, you'll recall, Noor, in 2005, this was the time when Israel was pulling out of the Gaza Strip. It was ending the settlement expansion in the Gaza Strip and removing all of the settlements. And at the time, one of the big issues that I and others were involved in was what was going to be the fate of the Gaza Strip. Now, we knew that left to its own devices, Israel would turn it into what it is today, which is the world's largest open-air prison, and that what they wanted to do was really just shut it down, throw away the key, and continue to maintain the occupation over it, continue to bomb, continue to cage, etc. One of the what we were told at the time was that it was necessary to negotiate with the Israelis and negotiate the future of the Gaza Strip, and in particular what was going to happen with the flow of goods and how people would be able to move between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And in one of the meetings, and this was one where Shimon Peres was actually present, without even flinching, the person who was there from one of the Israeli ministries said that the specifications for the scanners that they were looking for was so high that it hadn't actually been created. Not only that it wasn't on the market, that it hadn't actually been created. And so in reading this plan over this weekend, when I was looking at this, one of the things that really struck me was that it sounded as though Kushner was just given carte blanche to do whatever he wanted, to put together this wonderful package, this wonderful plan. But despite the fact that he meets with the Israelis very regularly, that it wasn't even, it didn't even dawn on him that there are measures and that there are ways in which the Israelis have been limiting and trying to crush, not just limit, but actually crush the Palestinian economy. So in addition to the recycled ideas, the absence of the word occupation, the absence of freedom, as Ibrahim said, the absence of any political process, the absence of any connection to the ground, what also very much struck me was that they didn't even recognize how Israel has gone about to very much crush the Palestinian economy. And they didn't actually do anything to address those elements to address that side either. It's one that is really devoid of any reality, looks very glossy, looks very pretty, but not at all applicable to our lives.
About the economic plan. You're on, Ibrahim. Okay, now we can hear you. Hello?
Yes. Yeah, okay, sorry. Hello?
Yeah.
The biggest problem I have with this plan that we looked at last night when it was released from the White House, actually, the biggest problem is with its title, Peace to Prosperity Plan, right? That's a whole entire reframing and reorientation of the whole approach that was used in 1993 with Peace for Land or Land for Peace approach, where the Palestinians are promised a state, promised land. But here comes with the title. The title is so scary, right? When you see it as Peace to Prosperity Plan, and it's not even Peace to Prosperity. I think they should have said probably Peace to Promised Prosperity, because there is no such thing, that this is going under the current circumstances and under the conditions that the plan establishes that you're going to see prosperity. There's no way. even from strictly economic perspective. So the attempt by the White House is to reframe the peace process and make it, instead of a Palestinian state, land for peace, is for a promised prosperity. That's the biggest problem. And that says everything. Now, whatever comes afterwards, it will become problematic, because this is the main foundation and orientation of the thing. Now, moving to other problems, the plan says a lot about unleashing potentials, right? Unleashing, even the word really last night, caught my attention of how much are we unleashing here, unleashing potentials and unleashing the aspirations and unleashing the Palestinian movement. Well, there is only one way to unleash potentials and unleash, what the Palestinians can do, is by ending the occupation, right? As long as there is an occupation, there is no unleashing, right? There is only is improving the occupation and working under occupation under these circumstances. So that's again a much bigger problem of promising things that cannot be done without sovereignty, without a political authority in place. And by the way, this is not a new approach. We tried this back again to 2008, where the quartet, right, took a similar approach, though also we had the political vision. But we were told, the Palestinians were told, that build your institutions, right, establish your institutions, and the recognition will come as a result, because build the state on the ground and the resolution comes as a result. And here Salam Fayyad goes on building these institutions, and building, by the way, on false economic grounds, because there was no, in 2008, a productive Palestinian economy to support the style of life and the type of institutions that Salam Fayyad built in 2008, or started to build in 2008. So all these institutions were built based on, again, assumptions and donor support, like coming from other countries, and with the absence of a political authority, with the absence of a sovereignty in place in order to build these institutions. So when we saw all this, like the departure of Salam Fayyad, all collapsing, because all what Israel could do is just to stop, as what we've seen today, stopping the Palestinian taxes that it's collecting, for the Palestinians, not passing those on, and then everything collapses. So this building of unleashing, without the political sovereignty, everything can collapse at any moment. There are other problems with the plan, is that it treats Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, Israel all equally, right? As okay, well then who's the the conflict parties? As there is no conflict. The plan does not say or even imply that there is a conflict, because if you're treating Jordan, Lebanon, Israel all at the same time without like resolving the conflict or the problem with Israel, so all at the same time, so who the Palestinian having problem with exactly? Because here it doesn't say anything of this plan. Of course, the plan doesn't mention anything about the state, and we can go on because it's full of many other problems.
I mean, there are so many things we can discuss about the plan, but I just want to build on what you just said regarding the participation of Arab states. So my question is, why was Bahrain chosen as the venue for the workshop? And what can you say about the level of Arab participation? And do you think this will lead to more normalization by Arab countries with Israel? Maybe Ibrahim, you can start to answer this question.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, we have seen the Arab participation is not to the level that they're expected. We have two solid participation, yes, from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, but the major partners, the major parties in the region, when it comes to the conflict with Israel, the neighboring countries like Egypt and Jordan, participating with less than what they were asked on the level of finance minister. So that's one statement that we're not seeing this. So I see the whole thing, why it's Manama. Of course, I mean, it's very obvious that there is a statement where Saudi Arabia is not ready for this approach. Bahrain does not decide on its behalf. There is everything is linked to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not ready for this. So Bahrain was chosen, to answer your question, is that the place where they can do this. And this is not new, because historically, the way the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, whenever Saudi Arabia is not prepared or wants to do something that does not want to have on its land, so the easy approach is export to Bahrain. And I'm not sure how much Bahrain really has a say on this, because Bahrain owes a lot to Saudi Arabia. So you can really see that who's behind this is mainly Saudi Arabia, not Bahrain. Now, whether this is going to lead to more normalization with Israel on this, yes and no, actually. The yes part, I think we can see this on the government level in terms of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates in particular, talking about these three countries. But I don't see that going beyond this, because keep in mind, we have 3 Gulf countries that they're not attending. Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, they're not part of this. And these are, again, this brings us to the problem of we're having a divided Gulf Cooperation Council between 2 blocks over here. Jordan, we know how serious Jordan, since Trump came to power, about resisting the whole deal of the century approach, and Jordan was pressured enormously in order to attend, and probably is going to attend, for some reason on a much lower level. But let's keep in mind that when we're not talking here about the government level, we're talking about the people's level. That's where we see, the major thing. We have not seen any normalization taking place on the people's level, even in the Gulf countries, in countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia, that they are participating. We have not seen that. In Bahrain, we have seen more active movement, on the public level, of anti-normalization against normalization with Israel, and this applies to the rest of the Arab world. So on that level, I don't see that we're going to see more normalization. And before I end on this, even the public level and on the countries that they're supported, that they're participating to the level that's kosher expected, UAE and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, I think the whole approach of the deal of the century is linked to the issue with Iran, right? Is that the Americans and the Israelis are expected to deliver on Iran, contain Iran, right? So to help Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain on this, and Saudi Arabia delivers on the Palestinian, making concessions on the Palestinian side. So I think we cannot separate the 2 approaches here, and we're seeing that the Iranian fight is not making the progress that Saudi Arabia would like to see. So I will not be surprised once there are some sort of movement or change on the political track with Iran. We will see, even on that level, the whole normalization issue is going in reverse, and we're not moving any longer.
Yeah, thank you, Ibrahim. Diana, do you have anything to add, or can I ask you a different question, just for the sake of time?
I was actually going to say that Ibrahim said everything, so you can move on to the next question. That's great.
I have a question to you, Diana, regarding the Palestinian strategy. So Palestinians have been united so far on boycotting the workshop and asking other Arab states to boycott the workshop. Do you think it's enough to say no? Is the Palestinian strategy working? And what more can be done by the Palestinians?
Look, I think when I get asked this question, it often leads me to think as though that there's something that they can be doing in order to affect change, and there really isn't. And I think we do a disservice if we begin to raise up the profile of the Palestinian Authority in ways that it shouldn't be raised. This is really an authority that is under military occupation itself. They don't have the capability of doing anything from moving to getting money to doing any of those sorts of things. So I think that we're wrong to expect that there should be more that's being done. That being said, I think that the approach that has taken shape of really highlighting how this conference is not only going to be useless, but can actually be can actually undermine Palestinian rights has been the correct approach. And the approach of trying to not only get more and more people to boycott the conference, but also to try to raise this idea of how it isn't at all linked to politics has also been a very important one. That's not enough, though. So as much as I am very cognizant of the limited role of the Palestinian Authority, I do also think that there hasn't been enough to change the situation on the ground in terms of things like making sure that there is a reconciliation, making sure that there is national unity, coming up with a strategy that's actually going to address the occupation rather than simply live under the occupation. For example, right now, we're now in our third month where the Palestinian Authority is only paying 50% salaries to the staff of the Palestinian Authority because of the fact that the withheld tax revenues. That 50% money is only coming from banks. Banks are unable to extend any further, and the Palestinian Authority is unable to borrow any further. Yet, despite that, there still hasn't been a plan that has been created to try to either get rid of or wind down the Palestinian Authority or come up with some alternatives in terms of funding sources. So we end up 25 years later in this exact same quagmire with four different US presidents that have come and gone, or one hopefully going to leave soon, in which we're seeing that it's been the same strategy for the past 25, 26 years. This is where things need to change. It's not just on the level of relating to the Bahrain conference and the Trump plan, but on a much more fundamental level of asking the questions: what are we going to do with the Palestinian Authority? How are we going to unite? What is our strategy for liberation? And sadly, those questions haven't been asked.
Ibrahim, do you have a couple of things to add or regarding the Palestinian strategy?
Okay, well, just very quick on this, just to build on what Diana said. The Palestinians are very weak in terms of, they're just sitting without money. But there is, in their weakness, actually, there is a very strong thing that they have, which is they hold the legitimacy card. Nothing can be legitimized without the presence of the Palestinians. So you can stop the money, you can dissolve the Palestinian Authority, you can even prevent Abbas from traveling outside the West Bank, right? But you can never force them to say yes, right? And as long as the Palestinians are not saying yes, then there is nothing legitimate over here to be done. And of course, building Palestinian unity, engaging, I think even engaging with the international community, with Europe and with other countries, there's some potential there that the Palestinians can do as well, that they're not doing enough.
Okay, so I have many more questions to ask, but I'm gonna go and start asking you the questions by the audience. So the first question has 4 votes. So I'm gonna start with this question. So it says, Trump has accelerated the US bipartisan uncritical support of Israel that has been supporting Israeli violence for decades with little more than rhetorical condemnation. However, under Trump, Israel is now openly given carte blanche to do as it pleases with regard to the Golan, Jerusalem, repression in the OPT, etc. The question is, how does Trump's agenda change the landscape for those in the struggle for Palestinian rights and statehood? And is it truly that much of a departure from the past? Maybe we can have Diana answer this question on the impact on the international solidarity movement.
I think it's, thank you for the person who posed the question. And also, I think I'm going to step back a little bit and look at it not just on the international solidarity movement, but actually look at it on the level of US policy. Have things changed? Yes. I think that we would be doing ourselves a disservice to just look at at what the US presidents in the past have done and the positions that they have taken and link Trump to those positions. And the reason I say this is it's important to look at 2020. Who is going to be the US president, assuming it's not Trump, or assuming it is, the person who comes after Trump? Who is going to be that US president who is going to unwind and say, actually, we're going to move the embassy back to Tel Aviv? Nobody. Who is going to be that US president who's going to take down and not recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan? And again, the answer is nobody. What Trump has done, and this is why I think it's very important for us to recognize that there is no Trump plan that's on the horizon. We're seeing the Trump plan actually come to fruition as we speak now. What he is doing now is he's putting into place measures that is going to make it virtually irreversible for any new U.S. administration to come and do. So in the past, there was always, Israel is Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, applaud, but the embassy was never moved. This man is putting into place mechanisms that are designed to make sure that change becomes permanent. And this is why he is so very much loved by the Israeli right, by Netanyahu, by the Kushners. This is why he stacked his deck with the people around him, is they want to make these issues permanent. Now, the question is, what is it that we can be doing? And I think that that's a very important question. Is first, we can be recognizing what it is that he is doing. These aren't just small measures that he's taking, but we have to start pushing. If in a U.S. context, I'm not American, but for those who are following and are interested in U.S., in whoever the next U.S. president is, they have to be pushing and asking these questions of these candidates in terms of making sure that they unwind, decolonize, rather than simply accept Trump's plan as being the status quo. Second, and I think more importantly, is we internally inside Palestine have to get to a place where we are, as I mentioned earlier, Ibrahim added, where we are challenging not just the occupation, but Israel's stronghold over our lives. And that's something that for the past 25, now 26 years, we've been lulled into this Oslo framework. And in this Oslo framework, that space has either not been there or has been crushed in order to have that conversation of where it is that we should be going. So things like checking about whether we should be pushing for one state rather than holding on to this two-state framework. Things like reforming the various institutions that we have, the PLO and otherwise. Things like trying to engage with the diaspora rather than viewing them as the enemy, which is what the Palestinian Authority has done for quite some time. Things like engaging with Palestinians who are citizens of Israel. Those are the things that we haven't done, and instead the Palestinian Authority has really been myopically focused on Oslo and only Oslo, negotiations and only negotiations. And the time has definitely come for a new strategy that takes into account all of these changes that Trump is actually putting into place.
Thank you so much, Diana. I have a second question from Zena Tahan with 4 votes. So maybe, Ibrahim, you can address this one. So the question is, Palestinian demands are being framed as political. Is it inaccurate to refer to fundamental basic rights and dignity as political rights? I mean, yes, Palestinians have national aims, but the core of the problem is that the basic rights are being denied. So do you have any insights on this and how the framing is happening as political rights or not?
Yeah, I think this is linked to what also Diana mentioned in her last couple of sentences. But let me just comment very quick on the previous question, which is what I see that Trump doing, very briefly, is that what I call the perpetuation of the conflict. Because now with these irreversible things, or what seem to be irreversible things, Israel is no longer incentivized to make any concessions or to engage in any meaningful negotiations. Israel got without negotiations from Trump did not get from over 25 years of negotiation under different administrations. So why would Israel negotiate? So what basically Trump sending the message is that without negotiations, you can get what you want, and there is you don't have to make any concessions, which what we know the way to resolve any conflict. And for the Palestinians, I just can't imagine in many generations to come that would be a Palestinian generation saying, "Oh, Jerusalem does not belong to us." That will never happen in 10,000 centuries in the future. So what we are end up with actually is a perpetuation of the conflict, thanks to the Trump administration and all the damage that have created to both, by the way, the Palestinians and the Israelis alike. Right? Because I think the Israelis missed an opportunity to settle this conflict under the Oslo Agreement, that they missed it. And they went with their extreme right policies, and they will remember that they had an opportunity and they missed it and went to the extreme side. Now this is also posing, which is linked to the question that you asked, Noor, is about poses serious challenges and to the Palestinians. What do we do next? Right? This is for the first time ever, right, that I'm seeing this equal rights, dignity approach that's being promoted, right, and is being debated among Palestinians intellectuals that fought all their lives, by the way, for the two-state solutions and they committed their political careers and invested in the Oslo Agreement. They're departing that approach and moving to an area where now it's about talking about the one-state solution and the equal rights approach. It doesn't matter, one-state solution, three-state solution, whatever solutions, but the approach is being here influenced, and it's changed to more of a two-state solution, to rights approach, dignity approach. And I'm one of those who talk about dignity as a starting point for treating or for dealing with this conflict. And where we're going to start, we're going to start from 1948. So the start is, unless we are recognized that there is a Nakba that happened in 1948, we cannot move forward on anything. So that's where we start. And that's where our dignity lies, is that someone owes us an apology. Someone came and crushed our society, shattered our society. We are shattered into dozens of countries around the world, right? One has to acknowledge this and one has to apologize for this, right? And that's where our dignity is as our starting point. That the debate you would not heard before the Trump administration, and including from people like me, right, who was believing 5 years ago, still believing that we should give the two-state solution a chance. But again, with this Trump administration, permanent or irreversible changes that he's making, I think the whole approach that is going now revised. And I hear, this debate among intellectuals talking about this, and I think at some point, not in the too distant future, we're going to see this developing taking a different form. And I end with this, if you run a poll today, actually, for the one-state, two-state solution, it's very likely that you will find more people voting for the one-state solution than the two-state solution, and on an equal rights and dignity ground moving forward.
Thank you, Ibrahim. So we have a question from Mimi Kirk to Diana regarding an article regarding a piece published in Al Jazeera yesterday, Diana, in which you said that Israel would not allow the Kushner plan to be implemented. Does this tell us something about the US-Israel relationship right now, despite its closeness? Does it simply tell us that for both Israel and the US, the plan is for show and to more easily allow for annexation, or is it something else?
Yes, it's a great question. And I think that, I don't want anybody to read into it that the Israelis and the Americans are at odds. I think that this was very much, Jared, do whatever you want to do, write whatever you want to write. We know it's going to go nowhere anyway. And the attempt is just to show that the Palestinians are always saying no. This is what I had in mind when I made the comment. This is based on previous experience when the Israelis have in the past said that they are on board with with changing things, that they never on the ground, they never actually let anything be implemented. And I gave you the example of the scanners. I think that this was an exercise. I don't want to be so crude about it, but I feel that this was a homework exercise that Jared had. He put it together. He put together a nice little glossy presentation. The president said, "Oh, fantastic! This is wonderful." The Israelis said, "Do whatever it is that you want to do." And on the ground, we know that what is going to happen. And as always, the Palestinians will always be the ones that are blamed for it, because they love blaming the victim rather than the perpetrator. So I think what it says about the Israeli-American relationship is that we've never seen a much closer relationship than we are seeing now. And the fact that that we're not hearing major protests from the Israelis on this plan is very indicative. In the past, there would have been at least some, no, we can't, but this is a wink, wink and a nod, nod. And so I think that there's very much a closeness that the two of them are sharing, knowing that nothing is going to change for Palestinians.
There's a question about the Manama Conference and that it's expected to be a big failure. What do you think, Ibrahim?
Well, actually, it's very obvious from the moment it started with with this level of participation. It's not going anywhere. And even with the absence, even Israel is not invited, by the way. And if Israel and the Palestinians are not invited, who is really going to resolve the conflict? Is it going to resolve the conflict? And I think it would have been better if they discuss the Iran crisis in the Manama workshop, because that's more relevant and that's more important, and probably that could produce something. But there are no parties to talk to and to change. And there is no, with this plan that Jared Kushner released last night, again, no one has donated anything or committed or pledged anything to make a commitment to this. There is no mechanism, there is no follow-up mechanism after that. We haven't heard from them anything what they're going to do next. And by the way, if you look at even the agenda, the way it was written and the way it was said, I mean, it's even if you look at it, it said hosted by Bahrain, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and the United States of America. So they're even shy of saying who's the organizer. Just saying we're just the host. And by the way, there was a statement from the Bahrainis about a few weeks ago saying, "Oh, we're not organizers in any way. We're just hosting this workshop." So who's exactly the organizer? No one is taking ownership, like I'm talking officially on the agenda, because that's what it's written. Hosted by the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United States of America. And the other thing, when is actually you start with the small country, right? It should be hosted by the United States of America and Bahrain. So to start with Bahrain is an attempt on Jared Kushner is trying to export his failure to someone else, right? To the Bahrainis, right? Even of how they're going to do this and not taking ownership. I haven't seen anyone taking ownership. I haven't seen any follow-up mechanisms. I haven't seen even on the political aspect that was pushed, which is a big statement of that this is not working and it's failing. It was promised in the words of Jared Kushner that it's going to be released after the Eid, which was a few weeks ago, but we haven't seen anything. And now they're saying in November, like after the Israeli elections. This is the 7th time of delays of this workshop, which is a very strong indicator, a solid statement that this is failing, nothing is working. And I agree totally with Diana. The way I see this, I don't see more than this is a PR campaign, like Jared, write whatever you want, do whatever you want. We know it's not gonna work. And even like prominent scholars and former politicians in the US, in Washington, DC, who were involved in this, big names like Dennis Ross and David Aaron Miller, they came publicly and openly and spoke that this is not going to work. So I'm not sure, other than the three, the team of Kushner, Greenblatt, and David Friedman. That, by the way, I think they're making big bucks as a result of this. They're making big money, and they're benefiting personally, individually. But beyond that, honestly, I'm not seeing any indicator to suggest that this is going to go anywhere.
Thank you, Ibrahim. So this is linked to another question we have from Nadia. Maybe Diana, you can address this one. So the question is, shouldn't we see this deal as a major distraction from what's going on the ground? It sucks up all the air in the room and focuses discussion on a mirage, and has done so far for the past 3 years. So is it just a distraction?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not even 3 years, it's beyond that. Look, the big problem is whenever there's a new plan or a new idea that is going to be introduced, the Israelis use the opportunity to build and expand settlements. And the international community, try as we might, as much pressure as we put on them to tell them, you need to stop this, they seem to somehow believe that all of it will be eliminated or eviscerated with some new plan that's created. You know, we are right now on the eve of 15 years since the ICJ decision regarding the wall. And 15 years ago, when we were pushing and saying to the international community, you have to do something about this wall, they kept saying, oh, no, don't worry, it will all go away during negotiations. So similarly, we're seeing now, as President Trump has now been in office for over 2 years, and for over 2 years he's been talking about this Trump plan, and for over 2 years we've seen the level of settlements that have been going up that is accelerating. We've seen the highest rate of home demolitions ever in history, and yet nobody's willing to do anything, because the theory is that all of this will be magically undone when we actually have negotiations, when there is a new plan that is released. So this is being done specifically and purposefully in order to distract, in order to get people's attention away, and to instead allow the facts on the ground, what Israel's doing on the ground, to take shape, and to continue the policy of home demolitions, land confiscation, settlement construction, isolation of Gaza, the whole mechanism that we've now seen put into place regarding the occupation by remote control in terms of the checkpoints. This is exactly what the point is.
So if we want to just move a step forward and talk more about action that can be done on the ground by Palestinians or the international solidarity movement, we have a question on how can non-violent struggle at the level of people and youth make the difference? Do you think it can make a difference, and how can it make a difference? Maybe Ibrahim, you can answer this one, and then we can hear from Diana.
Well, I thank the person who asked this question, because definitely that's what's needed at this moment. And this is linked to to a previous question that you asked about what the Palestinians can do at this time, which is engaging with the international community and to try to mobilize on that level. And let's not forget that in South Africa, it was the international solidarity movement that was able to pressure the apartheid regime in South Africa and to make a difference and end the apartheid regime there. So I think that's what's needed at this moment, and we need to see more organized approach internationally in terms of non-violent BDS movement taking place and adding pressure. And there are, of course, for anyone who wants to read, the BDS movement has made so many progresses and many achievements in different places, especially in Europe and even in the United States. So there is something that can be done. The most important thing here is that the need to mobilize non-violent pressure, non-violent movement, is that this is what's going to address the severe power imbalance between the parties of the conflict. You have the most powerful party in the whole thing is Israel, supported by the most powerful country in the world, the United States, and the Palestinian Authority sitting in Ramallah without money, right, to pay their employees, to pay their salaries. So with this kind, from our understanding of how international conflicts work, you cannot reach agreements or make a difference in a severe power imbalance unless one party is willing to surrender. And by the way, we shouldn't be surprised, because there was an Israeli op-ed written in the New York Times just 2 days ago, even moving the discussion to what's wrong with the Palestinians surrendering. So it's, going to that level, of course, which will never happen, because the Palestinians have never surrendered to any of all the crises that happened in the past, and it's not something that in the hands of the Palestinian leadership. So again, I think what we need at this time is to slightly, at least slightly, adjust the power imbalance. How are we going to do this? Not by nuclear weapons. The Palestinians build the nuclear reactor and try to balance the power, but comes as the case with the South Africa from international solidarity movement, and there has a lot of been work done there. You need to engage more and build more, and I think we can have some hope on that level.
Mm-hmm. Diana, this is our last question. So do you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I was going to add something. Look, we already are doing nonviolent resistance. And I think that it's important to keep in mind, just last week was 63 weeks of the Great Return March, where we have thousands of Palestinians coming out in Gaza who are protesting nonviolently. That's not the issue. Look, there's, I think, a few things that are missing. Nonviolent protest happens all the time. It happens with us going to the checkpoints. It happens with us trying to maintain our daily lives. Sometimes it's organized, sometimes it's not. The big problem has been, at least in my opinion, that the Palestinian Authority hasn't encouraged and hasn't latched on to these nonviolent protests. Sure. Instead, we see protests happening, but the PA stays silent about it, or it tries to crush it, as has been the case in Ramallah. And when it comes to something like BDS, which is perhaps the most useful tool that we have, given the occupation is now being run by remote control, that's again something where the PA and the PLO haven't signed on to that very effective mechanism. So in the case of South Africa, we had a leadership that had a vertical relationship with grassroots and then up. And in this case, we don't have that. Instead, we have a leadership that has no connection to the grassroots, and that in some cases just trying to replace the grassroots or try to eviscerate the grassroots. So in my opinion, what I think we need to do is to make that voice louder, heard more, and to either get the Palestinian Authority to sign on or to have them step aside, because they at this point remain one of the obstacles to people recognizing that this is a struggle for freedom and for independence and for equality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana and Ibrahim, for your insights. I want to thank our audience for joining us, for asking all these questions. I'm sure we can spend 2-3 more hours talking about this economic workshop that is happening, but I hope at least we had some time to discuss some important issues. I hope the conversation, especially the discussion by Ibrahim and Diana, was insightful. Please make sure to join Al-Shabaka email list. You have a tab on the screen, and Al-Shabaka is also a crowd-funded project, so please donate $5, $1, whatever you can. This would really help the team of Al-Shabaka. Again, thank you so much. I was honored to facilitate this call with Diana and Ibrahim, and hopefully we will have you soon, because we're having another policy lab in a month. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Noor, for your participation and moderation of this. And thank you, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Ibrahim. And thank you to Shabaka and people who are signed in. Thanks.